Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to a Monday clash of the Correspondents. And today we're looking forward to an encounter in game week 7. And Adam Pritchard just said to me, he's not happy that it was a draw yesterday. I said for the two of us on this podcast, I'm pleased that it was. But first, let me introduce you to our Bournemouth correspondent, Neil Grover. How are you, Neil?
Good morning. Yeah, not doing too badly, all things considered. Thank you for having me again.
Good stuff, mate. And Mr. Adam Pritchard, our Arsenal correspondent here. How are you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It could have been much worse, this conversation. So I'll take
Yes.
that positive.
Yes, when I came back to you guys last week and said, "Can we do 10 a.m. Monday morning?" I was like, "What have I done? what have I done?" So at least we can, keep it peaceful between us. But Neil, would like to start with yourself. What have you made of the start? It's winless, but we knew this was going to be a rough start of fixtures. We identified that your first 7 fixtures, including the weekend game against Arsenal this weekend, you picked up nothing from
Yep.
the equivalent last year. So you're 3 points up. I guess that's all right, is it?
Yeah, I think I'm cautiously optimistic of what we've seen so far. There's a clear, I think, plan. Like I can see what Iraola's trying to do with the team. Um, I think we've still got some injuries, albeit injuries that we kind of self-inflicted because we bought injured players, but players that we know are going to improve what we've got on the pitch at the moment and are due to come back imminently. Um, so yeah, we've got that, but I think, like you said, going into this first 7, I mean, without being too funny about it, a subjective neutral, what would they have said our easiest game was? Chelsea at home?
Oh, man,
Question
get the
mark?
digs in already. 1.5 minutes in.
No, I mean like, but
Well, probably West Ham opening day, wasn't it? In fairness, probably.
yeah, I mean, but it's a toss up, right? Just because of our record against Chelsea and stuff. But it's been rough. Like, there's no two ways about it. But we're 3 points better off than we were last year. And I think there's some nice things to look forward to in terms of what's coming down the track. Hopefully,
You
just
said you
not
can
maybe this
see
weekend.
a plan coming through with Iraola. What is that? Can you just elaborate on what you're seeing that's new and different?
So I think we saw it a lot yesterday, actually, in the Brighton game. It was that high press, which actually led to our goal because we were very smart about how we let is it Verbruggen,
Yeah,
the goalkeeper, yeah, have the ball, and when we pressed him, because we there was sort of 3 men round him at almost every time when he came out with the ball, and eventually then that led to our goal because we sort of let him have space, let him think he had time, and then suddenly we pounced on him. Um, Aside from that, it's very sort of quick to get the ball forward. I guess it's very like Bielsa-esque in a way, which I think is perhaps why we look to bring in Sinistera, although we've not really used him yet. Um, but yeah, I think you can really see that high press. There's a lot of intensity in what we're doing, um, and I think we feel a lot more organized as well. Like when we've made and conceded goals, like the 3 goals yesterday, they felt like they were just down to individual errors and mistakes, as well as just a bit of class from Brighton. But I don't really mind that. Our average age of our defence is like 22. And okay, Neto probably should be helping more than he does because he's in his 30s with all the experience he has. But that's another another point for another day, I think. But yeah, I think there's a feeling within the Bournemouth camp that there is a clear way forward. It's going to take time for the process to work its way through. It's totally different to what O'Neill played and what Parker played. And it's been a horrible few games. Even the owners have said, look, we don't really expect so much out of this few. I think that's why they made the O'Neill move.
Adam. Neil mentioned process. Is there anything you want to say to him? Because I know that's a buzz Arsenal word, isn't it? Trust the process and all that jazz. Is there anything you want to say to Neil on difficult start that his team has had and trust in the process?
I mean, it's if you want to draw a parallel, I think it's easier to accept bad results if you do have some sort of underlying faith in the way that a manager is playing and kind of it's at least tactically interesting. Like I think that was a lot of the issues Arsenal fans had with Arteta at the start of his time was that we were quite defensive. We played like a back five quite a lot, and we were just looking at hitting teams on quick transitions, and it wasn't really the kind of football that Arsenal fans were used to and wanted to see. But then sort of even in the stickier period at the start of the season before last, you could tell that Arsenal were trying to play a more expansive way. We just didn't have the players for it. So yeah, I think before the start of the season, I predicted Bournemouth to do quite well. And I suspect as the players get used to this new play style, because like you were saying, it's completely different to kind of the two managers that you've had before. I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, did you acknowledge that, Neil? As the closer we were getting to the season kickoff, there was a lot more people coming out and saying, "Look, you know what? They might be 10th, 11th this year. I kind of predict them to be a little bit of a dark horse to kind of push towards top half." Did that bring an element of nervousness for you?
No, I mean, I think part of it was the business that we did in the transfer window, which we publicly did quite a lot of. We signed, I think it was like 150 millions worth of players or something obscene for Bournemouth. But I've got no problem with that. If the owners are going to back the manager, great. It's their manager, so fine. I think there is also a lot, and Bournemouth have perhaps made their own nest here, but we've signed a lot of I'm trying to think of the nice way to put it, FIFA Football Manager sort of players that people that are in the community, that people might be making those sort of predictions. They may be they may be working off of those games as much as anything, right? And so players like Zabani, who I think is really, really good, he's a bit of a Football Manager darling, and stuff like that, I think has perhaps helped that hype a little bit.
Football's not played on a laptop, don't you, Neil?
100% do. But that's what I'm saying, is that people that are looking at making those predictions, I think there's a little bit of judgment based on that as well from our team.
Adam, are you happy with Arsenal's start? And I guess probably first and foremost, how are you feeling day after North London derby?
On the North London derby, I think I felt at the time pretty disappointed. And then the more it sat with me, the kind of more accepting I've come about the result. It's like, we didn't lose, so it's not the end of the world. We're still unbeaten, which is obviously a good thing. I just can't help but look at it as a missed opportunity to kind of take an extra kind of step and push on again after a couple of more positive results, mainly sort of the one in the Champions League and then the Man United game as well, where I thought this was an opportunity to really stamp our authority on the season a little bit, because it feels like we've kind of been both a little bit in the games and also sort of the narrative of the season. We've been passengers a little bit so far, I think.
What do you mean by that?
Well, not even necessarily that it matters who's being talked about, but I think it kind of is indicative of upward trajectory of a lot of other teams, that everyone came into the season putting Arsenal as kind of, well, not everyone. A lot of people came into the season and put Arsenal as second, the ones that are most likely to challenge City. And I think in terms of the popular perception of how teams are doing, from a positive perspective, there's a lot of focus on Brighton, rightly, because they're playing good football. I think there's quite a lot of focus on Liverpool, because I think people are kind of surprised that perhaps the performances aren't there in a holistic sense, but they're right up there in the table. And then obviously there's a lot of focus on Spurs, because the style of play is completely different to what it was last season. And it seems like Arsenal are a little bit of an afterthought, which is fine. Like, I don't necessarily care about it, but I think it is indicative of the fact that we haven't really hit our stride yet. I think
it's indicative of expectations, isn't it?
Yeah,
kind of going back to your first point, that everybody's kind of, majority of people predict you to finish second or at least be City's closest challengers for the title. So that's why the performances or perhaps results of, I mean, Liverpool have had a difficult run of fixtures, to be honest, and have had a really good start. Brighton's obviously going to get headlines. Tottenham, as you mentioned, change of complete philosophy, basically. Whereas we know what we get with yours, right? So maybe it's a little bit more of that. Yeah,
and that was part of my disappointment and kind of reflecting on the game on Sunday was, I think we should have won. Although I can understand people coming out of it and saying a draw is a fair result, because I think
yes,
it was fairly even. But I think...
Shut up, Adam. It was a fair result, honestly, mate.
No, I can understand that perspective, and I totally get, and I think that's fair. I'm coming at it from the point of view that in the first half, I think we were dominant, and then
massively. To be honest, I spent the first 35 minutes looking for the halftime whistle, mate. So I get that.
Exactly, and I think we let you back into the game twice with individual mistakes. And although David Raya pulls off like an unbelievable save, which like 9 times out of 10 is probably a goal, even then, I think your goal comes from Saka pressing in too quickly on Maddison, when I think he should have just held back a little bit.
He's still throwing his dart, wasn't he?
No, I don't think he was. I think he had come round by then. And then Son finishes that move in the box, surrounded by 3 defenders, which is a good finish. It's a very good finish, and it's good work from Maddison in the build-up. But I think, like you say, the raised expectations, I'm looking at 4 Arsenal players on that goal who realistically should have done better. And then you go into half-time 1-1, and that's, you never want to let, I'm sure you both know it as well as I do. In a rivalry game, you never want to let the opponents back into it if you're on top at half-time. And then Declan Rice coming off, I think, changed things massively for us. Jorginho I think he's a decent player, and he's been pretty decent for us so far, but he's just not the same type of player, and we don't have enough athleticism in that midfield to kind of cover for Jorginho's lack of mobility and lack of pace. And it doesn't help that he gives the ball away for the goal, and was picked. He had his pocket picked for a couple of other chances too, that kind of combines to why I think Arsenal could have won, even though I do understand what people are saying. It's a fair result.
No, I definitely agree with the sentiment that Declan Rice going off obviously clearly did not help you. We'll come back onto him in a second, but I'm quite keen to get your opinion, Neil, actually, on the top end of the table, because you've drawn 3, you've lost 3. The 3 you've lost, about 3 teams Adam's mentioned: Tottenham, Brighton, and Liverpool. Mm-hmm. You've basically, so far, you've only lost to teams inside the top 4. And many people think with the next game, obviously that's minimum expectation for Arsenal this year, would be top 4. How do you see the other 3 teams, having played them all, in terms of whether they can, I wouldn't say necessarily be competitive with City, but do you think they can be competitive with Arsenal?
Yes. So I think if I was to list the 3 in terms of just that one game that I saw, so the little bubble that we saw against us, I think Tottenham very much impressed me. And I'm not just saying that so I come back next time.
Coming back anyway, but thanks, mate.
I think Brighton begrudgingly impressed me yesterday with how clinical they were. But I mean, I'm not saying anything new there. And then I think Liverpool, I felt like we were more in the game with them for a lot longer, which at Anfield is a big thing for us. So, but I think all of them, they'd certainly felt well above us, which that's not a shock to anyone. Although I would say I didn't feel like we were really out of any of the games, which is really good for our point of view. But yeah, I mean, I'm really interested to see this Arsenal versus how I picture Arsenal in my head, because obviously I didn't watch the game yesterday. I'm afraid I was watching ours, but in my head, Arsenal are better than those 3. So I'm really, really interested this weekend to see how that plays out.
What I would say is I don't know. In fact, based on this season, I would say I don't think an Arsenal without Declan Rice, Martinelli, and Trossard, I don't think it's better than any of those sides really at the moment, I would say.
That's a very big thing to say, Adam.
It's more based on... You
didn't have Declan Rice last year, right?
No, but we had Granit Xhaka, and I think there was a more solid midfield structure last year, whereas I think Declan Rice has been excellent for us so far, and the drop-off behind him is not only a drop-off in quality, but it's also like completely different stylistically. And I wouldn't confidently say I've seen enough from the backups to know that, like, a midfield of Jorginho, Odegaard and Havertz is very technically very, very good. But I don't know if it has the legs defensively
intensity
to kind of,
as well.
Yeah, it feels like a kind of the team that you could probably get away with all due respects to like a kind of a bottom three side at home. If you're already a goal up, you can probably have that midfield, keep the ball quite nicely, dictate the tempo of the game. But if you've got teams like Bournemouth who are trying to be more proactive coming at you, I don't necessarily know if that midfield, and this is just a hypothetical midfield three. I don't know if that team would be able to. And we saw on the weekend that midfield three couldn't really live with Tottenham at times.
If that midfield three starts at Bournemouth, are you worried?
Worried. I'd be more nervous than I would like to be. I think it sort of depends on how we shape up front. So if we were assuming that Trossard, Martinelli and Rice are all out of the next game, which they have the potential to be because the injuries are kind of a little bit vague on them, my ideal lineup, excluding the defence, would be Jorginho, Vieira and Odegaard in midfield, Havertz as a kind of nominal number 9, Jesus on the left and Saka on the right. Because I think...
Is that because you think Eddie Nketiah should be suspended, or...?
I just honestly have no idea how he didn't get sent off yesterday. He was that one that he had on Vicario. I thought that is the most orange card you can get. And then he continued to hare around. I think there was one time where he chased after Romero, and I thought this is not the kind of guy that you want.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
start getting in a fight with, because that'll flare up. And I think he was a very, very lucky boy. Like if a Spurs player did that to Raya, I'm sure the entire crowd would be screaming for a red card. But I also thought, and I don't know how you felt, James, from a kind of Spurs fan perspective, but I don't think he didn't really look sharp. I don't think he didn't look like he was kind of imposing himself in the box in the right areas. I don't think he made there were a couple of times where there was an opportunity for him to make a run at the back post where he didn't really make that move.
Yeah, there was one in the second half, wasn't there?
Yeah, I can't remember who crossed it, but it was there for him at the back post. And you're thinking, like, a true killer number 9 is kind of making that run and tapping it in. And to be honest, Eddie Nketiah has done that before. So yeah, I think he had a bit of an off game yesterday.
Just on that, there's a narrative you've probably heard since obviously the game finished. Arsenal need a new number 9, which I love the fact that people are referencing the Jesus miss, which obviously goes without saying he should have scored. But he's one of the few people that would have actually won the ball in the first instance to get himself in that position to have the shooting opportunity. Do you buy into that, Adam? That Arsenal need an Ivan Toney, for example? Or
well, I mean, if he was available, I wouldn't say no. But I did see a lot of people say that, and I also saw people say, "Oh, Jesus looks so much more comfortable out on the left wing," and I get that, and I know he said in the past that he does like playing out on the wing, but I think that's just a level that Jesus is at now. I think since he joined Arsenal, and when he was injury free, because I think when he came back from his injury, his level dropped a little bit, but when he's been injury free, he has just proven to have such a positive impact on the side in general. I think we could probably do with a number 9 for a different like physical profile, but only so we can kind of switch it up a little bit more depending on the opposition, which is partly why I wanted Havertz to play at the weekend, because I think what he did in the Community Shield is he showed not only can he compete for those kind of direct balls from a goalkeeper, but he does quite a good job at tracking defensive runners who kind of invert into midfield. Like he did quite a good job on John Stones, I think it was, in the Community Shield. And a lot of what Tottenham have kind of innovated for themselves, rather than more generally this season, has been with those kind of fullbacks stepping in. And I think he would have done a good job there. But yeah.
Yeah, I think in defence of both Jesus and Nketiah, one interesting thing, and I can only speak, this generally comes from a fan opinion, so it might be quite wrong. In the last third of the game yesterday, I was actually only worried on corners. I wasn't worried in open play. I mean, some of your deliveries, particularly left-footed in-swingers, are disgusting to try and defend, actually. But that was the only real concern. I felt quite comfortable in open play scenarios. So that's not just on the front man.
No,
that's on the creativity behind it as well.
And I think you're right. And I know Arsenal fans' new favourite stat is field tilt. And I know Clayton was talking about it on the Tottenham Arse the other week. And although that kind of, I think that's more about like passes in the final third. So trying to show not just possession being ball dominance, but areas in which you're dominating the ball. And I think Arsenal had the greater field tilt than Tottenham yesterday. So supposedly that shows that we were more dominant in the game, which certainly for the first half I thought we were. But we're not creating enough good chances. Like I think in terms of big chances created in the league, I think we're level with Luton and Crystal Palace on like 8, which is just not really enough.
It's alarming, that, isn't it? As an isolated statistic.
It is. And it was only when I kind of looked at that, I thought, well, perhaps Nketiah is like snapping at these chances and he's not making these runs because he doesn't know if the ball is going to be coming to him. He doesn't know if he's going to be getting these kind of opportunities. And if you want to be like completely brutal about it, you look at the way that we got our 2 goals yesterday. One was a deflected shot and the other is a penalty. So it's, even then, you wouldn't really consider either of those have been big chances created in open play. So it's certainly worrying when you consider, in an ideal, like everyone's fit scenario, like a midfield of Rice, Ødegaard, and either Vieira or Havertz. Like one of the first things that screams out to you is creativity, which I think then goes back to kind of some of the system teething troubles that I think have probably been our biggest issue this season.
Neil, how do you feel hearing all that when you're beginning to look forward now towards Saturday?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot there that I mean I'm sat here and I'm thinking, I might be getting a little bit more confident about some of the stuff, particularly what you were saying around in the midfield. Because just to loop back on one of the first things you said, we're going to get right up in your face with the high press, and if you're not able to deal with that, or perhaps it might be a bit more uncomfortable anyway, as Bournemouth away tends to be, right? I mean, big clubs don't tend to like coming here, so I wonder if we might
get a ticket, by the way. But go on.
Well, yeah, we don't want the riffraff coming in, mate.
Hurry up and build a stadium, for God's sakes.
It's on the cards. It's on the cards.
Hurry up.
Yeah, so I think that will be really interesting. What I'm really interested to see as well is what happens with Tyler Adams this week, because he's right on that sort of bubble. Is he going to be fit?
He's not going to throw him straight into Arsenal, is he? Surely.
He
hasn't played since what, March?
We got Stoke on Tuesday, so I wonder if we might see him.
Okay, sure.
And I'm not saying he'll play 90 minutes, of course not. But if there's a period, say 60 minutes, and it's maybe 1-1 or something like that, and you're perhaps tiring a little bit, someone like that's going to really get up in there might be a really interesting little change that we could make.
Yeah, fan of Tyler Adams. I really liked his work actually for Leeds and America, what I saw last year. Where do you see him when he is available? Where do you see him going into this? So what do you see him as? Is he just going to be an anchor? Is he going to be a pressing midfielder? What do you see?
So I see that what we're crying out for is that real that anchor just in front of the defence, because at the moment, as I mentioned earlier, our defence is so young and it's got so much potential, but it really just needs a little bit more help from the midfield, I think. So I see him as that help. I think that's what he was signed for, but I think he's perhaps more creative than we've had in the past in that role. I absolutely loved Jefferson Lerma, who was in that role last year, but he's perhaps not the most creative player. It would be fair to say. So I think perhaps Adams brings that ability to move forward with it a little bit more as well. And I'm really, really excited to see what he can do alongside Alex Scott when he's available as well. So I think there's a lot of excitement there. And I think out of all of the misses we've had, it's that central midfield so far, that central defensive midfield.
So do you see that as longer term moving forward? And for those who don't know, obviously Alex Scott's a young player bought from Bristol City. Do you see, if everyone was fit for Saturday. And do you see the midfield two, therefore, being the two new lads that we haven't seen yet, Adams and Scott? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think Scott, just because of his age, will be a little bit rotational. But I think in a bubble, I would see Adams and Scott, and then probably Billing at the sort of top of that triangle, if however you want to visualize it in your head. Yes. I like Christie, and he does bring in a lot, but I think Billing is just a better player, particularly when he's just off Solanke. I think he's a little bit more clinical. He's taller as well, which we're generally quite a small side, so having a little bit of height isn't a bad thing as well. And Christie, while he does add a lot to the team, he just doesn't. He's not the most clinical player on the team, I would say.
So you would say potentially keep an eye out for a possible switch of position for Philip Billing once the other players are fixed. Obviously, he's playing a deeper role. At
the moment he's playing in the role that I think Alex Scott will move into, and then I could see everyone kind of moving up one. So, which will be really interesting. But I would say before everyone rushes to buy Billing because he'll be more advanced.
You're okay, Alex, there, Neil. That was
I know. Well, I big up my own team, right? I think Alex Scott is still a way away. Like, I think we might see him in December sort of time. He's just about on grass now.
It's some of the cheaper ones than Billing that I think might be appealing to fancy managers, and that might be part of getting Mo Salah in a couple of weeks, for example. It's part why you're here now. We'll come back onto that, but Adam, before we move on, I just want to Declan Rice. What do we know at the moment in terms of potential injury? What's been reported as of Monday morning?
So he's reportedly was experiencing discomfort with his back, was what Arteta was saying during the first half. And obviously, when he gave his kind of quotes at the end of the game, they hadn't had time to assess him. But what Arteta said something along the lines of, like, we hope it's nothing major, but it's unusual for someone like Declan to complain, because I'm sure everyone can imagine he's the kind of guy that if it's like just a small thing, he'll carry on, play through it. And obviously, when it's an area like the back, which sort of, if that is where the issue lies, similarly to kind of Saliba, it is not really something you want to be too cavalier with. So I don't think we'll see him in midweek in the cup game. And to be honest, we don't really know enough, but I would be quite surprised if he played 90 minutes at the weekend. If he was bad enough to be taken off in a North London derby, I think there must be something wrong there.
That would be the concern, isn't it? The same as Saliba. Saliba had a back injury. You want to say it's a Sporting Lisbon game?
Yeah, Sporting.
Came off injured. League, and it was, we're not sure about the weekend. And then like 6 weeks later, it was still going on, wasn't it? And he is quite coy, Arteta, isn't he, with injury news? Like, won't rule Martinelli out the weekend. I'm thinking, be surprised considering what Trossard's done in the last two if you just throw him in. Now, I don't know if he might have even known himself at that point if Trossard had an issue. I don't know. But I wasn't sitting there at any point thinking, Martinelli will start on Sunday. I didn't get that vibe at all.
No, I didn't think he would at all. And I think what has been, even when people have been talking about, in fact, both the Martinelli and Trossard injuries, it's like, they've both had scans, but we need to wait a little bit longer to determine like the extent of it. And I don't think Martinelli has been included in the next Brazil squad for the next international break, which
they've already announced it.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I think that probably gives you a bit of an idea about the potential timeline for his injury.
Assuming they're both unavailable, what would you want to play on the left then?
Assuming both Trossard,
Martinelli and Trossard were unavailable, what would you want to play as the left-sided forward?
I would play Jesus there, and I'd put Havertz in the middle, and Vieira in midfield, who I was quite surprised. I don't know what your perspective on him in the first half was. I was kind of surprised he was taken off. I didn't think he did anything in particularly wrong, really.
I was going to say I like him as a player, but he wears your shirt, mate, so I can't find that possible, to be honest. But tidy player. I think he stepped up a bit on last year. To be honest, most of what I saw of him last year, I think you're not quite ready for your team. But yeah, he's played well, what I've seen of you this year, to be honest, mate. And yeah, I think he keeps the flow of the play moving much better than Havertz, is my biggest feeling on it.
Yeah, I think maybe my thinking, reflecting on it, was that I think he's a little bit slight, and the Spurs midfield has like turned into quite a kind of combative physical force. So I think maybe there was the thought to Havertz there, kind of, he doesn't strike you as the most physical player, but he is tall and he is quite good winning aerial duels. So that was the only thing that I really could have thought.
When the ball fell, there was a moment, I'm sure it was an injury time, the ball came towards Havertz and it sat really nicely for him on the volley on the edge of the box. What went through your mind? I'm interested to know.
Honestly, I thought he was going in. I thought this is the moment. I was like, this is it. He's going to absolutely lash it in top court, because it was the classic kind of, anyone who's played football at any level, you see a ball sit up like that and you think you absolutely have to hit it. And it looks much closer on kind of the TV angle that they initially showed, and then they did the behind one, and I was like, okay, yeah, that wasn't as close as I thought it was. But yeah, I think I've kind of accepted now. I've got a lot more. I'm willing to give him more time than I think a lot of Arsenal fans who are probably already a little bit at the end of their patience with him.
Really, already?
Yeah, I think the most notable for me anyway was in the Fulham game, when there are a couple of times where he just gave the ball away to a Fulham player, or the one clip, which I'm sure you've both seen, that kind of got gift, where Martinelli looks for a 1-2 and he just passes it straight back and it goes out into touch. And the crowd then, it was like a audible, heavy sigh, come on, groan kind of thing. And yeah, the sense I get is there are a lot of people, in fact, probably more so after the weekend, who were like, yeah, we shouldn't have sold Xhaka. The biggest problem in this team is Havertz isn't as good as Xhaka. Yeah.
What is it then about Xhaka that you're missing?
I think it's part of it is the energy. He kind of suddenly, in like the last 16 months of his career at Arsenal, decided he could run, which was a nice change. But yeah, I think it was partly the energy, the kind of, I think he's got a much better defensive instinct than Xhaka does, than Havertz does. Sorry, like there were a couple of times last season. I'm thinking most notably in the Newcastle game away at St James's Park, where he makes that kind of lung busting run back into our own box to slide tackle and block. I think it was might have been a Willock or an Almiron shot, which I just don't think you're ever going to see Havertz do. I think also he could at times fill in that kind of pivot role if the player who was like occupying the pivot at the time drifted out into the wide space. He was more comfortable covering Zinchenko at left back as well. Like that was quite often a little swap that we saw last season positionally in games, was Xhaka kind of sitting back a little bit if Zinchenko pushed forward. And he also, I would say he also had more of a presence in when he crashed the box. I think Havertz's movement is much more considered and measured, and it's a little bit less kind of visceral, if that makes sense. Like it's less kind of energetic. It's more, considered.
Ghost, doesn't he? Ghost.
Yeah, it's the kind of, it could be seen as like languid and lazy, but I think it's more measured, and it looks very coached, if that makes sense.
I suppose it would have been new for Xhaka, right? Get in the box, and so you probably just with that in mind, you probably do it a bit more. And I don't know, also haphazard almost, maybe.
Well, yeah, and the personality of the two is like Xhaka is like all kind of like thunderous. He's like clapping the crowd, roaring everyone on after every goal we score and after every goal we concede. He's much more of a vocal presence on the pitch. So I think as a fan, you naturally kind of, your eye gravitates to that more. And even if he kind of does things that aren't like ideal, like there are a couple of times where obviously he still made the odd stupid challenge, but when he was on the kind of positive trajectory of his Arsenal career, you think, oh, well, he has made that mistake, but he's done X, Y, Z good in the rest of the match. And the problem is with Havertz is a lot of what he is doing well at the moment, which there are things he is doing well, is it's secondary to kind of other players, and it's not as noticeable as some of that kind of more headline action, I guess.
Neil, is Lloyd Kelly ahead of Marcus Senesi now?
We came off injured the weekend.
So that'll be a no then.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. I mean, much like some of the Arsenal news, it's too soon to know exactly what's happened. But he came off. It was a forced substitution for Senesi.
Okay. What have you made of the two new fullbacks?
The fullbacks, I think, are really good. I really like Kirkez. I know he was probably at fault for two of the goals, you could argue. Yes.
I think, do you
Yesterday.
know what? He goes for the header, and I think he hears the shout mid-flight, and then he tries to duck out of it, and it's too late.
Yeah, because if you look, Zabani does duck. So I think there was definitely a shout because I think initially Bournemouth fans were like, well, Neto needs to be louder there. But I think the fact that Zabani ducks says to me that there was a shout. It's just for whatever reason, Kirkez didn't hear it. But he's 19. Look, at the end of the day, he will make mistakes. Little things will happen. That little not header and own goal could happen to literally any player in the Premier League at any time, right? So I'm not so worried about that. But going forward, he looks really good. He's really fun to watch as well. He's like constantly, just sort of being a little bit of a shit, which is nice. We lost a little bit of that with Lerma, and I think he's brought a little bit of that back. And then in the last, he's yet to do it for us, but in the last international break, he had an incredible assist for Hungary, where he sort of whipped the ball in, and it was just an absolute, pinpoint cross to, I don't know who the Hungarian striker was, I'm afraid, but it sort of went round, and so he really excites me, and I think Aarons as well has been everything that I kind of in my head thought Aarons was, and I know he went a little bit off the boil with Norwich towards the end, but he's been very solid. There hasn't really been anything defensively to worry about, and we're always seeing him in that sort of final third as well, both of them. So from an aggressive point of view, I think there's a lot to like about them. They're both trying to get the ball in. We're seeing a lot of, as we sort of said at the start, Bournemouth are trying to come into the box and kind of cut in and then cut the ball back towards the penalty spot for a finish, which Solanke in particular has done quite well out of so far, and I'm sure we'll talk about him in a minute anyway. But it also does bring in that Christie, Billing, whatever that option is as well. So yeah, I think there's been a lot to like. The whole defensive back four, I think it excites me as a fan to see these young players really sort of getting used to each other, and it's the future of Bournemouth.
How do you see Kirkez getting on against Saka?
I think there will be times when Saka does him because of his lack of experience. I think what he will look to do is perhaps not stand off as much as he should for someone of Saka's pace and presence, but there will be also times where you think you will watch him and he'll go, he's absolutely done Saka there, because he does have that just little bit of something as a left back. So I'm sure Saka will get joy, but at the same time, there will be times where Kirkez will have him, and it'll be fun, really fun to watch. It's one of the battles I'm really looking forward to.
Is Adam Bukayo Saka being mistreated by Arsenal?
In the sense of,
I get an increasing feeling from Arsenal fans that I hear of like, give him a break. Give him a break. There's like a lot on intensity. You've obviously had a real kind of mental, in terms of in your mind, difficulty towards the end of last season, as well as the physical stuff of it. And it just feels like there's times now you think he's never going to get a rest. It feels to us on the outside. Maybe there's times the decision needs to be made for him a little bit, because he does, and you've highlighted it quite correctly, right? He gets probably rougher treatment than probably anybody else in the league, I would say. And he handles it better than anybody else in the league as well, by the way. His upper body, for how slight a frame he is quite remarkable. But he must walk off nearly every game battered and bruised a bit. And even yesterday, you think, get him off the pitch a little bit. Did you think that yesterday?
Yeah, I said the exact same thing to a group of my mates I was chatting to. I said it's probably around 75 minutes, or I think he took a kick and you could tell he was limping. And then he took a much heavier one on his ankle around 85 minutes. And even after that, he still managed to produce that shot low down that Vicario just kind of tipped round and bottom right of his goal.
Gone wide anyway.
well, saves a save, shot on target, technically. Well, probably not. Anyway, but yeah, no, he still manages to produce those kind of moments of explosivity, even when he is probably 75%, which I think is why Arteta leaves him out there. And Arteta has talked about in the past, when he's kind of bigging Saka up as one of the best players in the world, it's like, well, the best players in the world need to learn to play 3 times a week. And I think that's almost why he's leaving Saka out there. But yeah, I do think, and it's a wider theme on Arteta not being the best. One of his I think his worst aspect as a manager is the fact that his substitutions aren't always timed correctly. I think it's his biggest weakness. And yeah, I think Saka definitely should have come off yesterday. I think he shouldn't play midweek.
No, surely you're going to mass rotate at Brentford in the cup, surely.
Well, you would hope so. But then again, if Martinelli, Trossard, Rice, if they're all out, what options do we have? We can play
Nelson,
right?
Surely, yeah.
Yeah, we can play Nelson on the right, but then in terms of like otherwise mass rotating, we can probably...
He brought a 15-year-old kid on at Brentford last year, and that was in the league. So
yeah, no, that's true. But I mean, I think that was a different Arsenal, and that was a different circumstance. But yeah, I think in response to your question, yeah, I do think Saka needs better protection from Arsenal, but I would also say that if I'm coming at it from Arteta's perspective, he will be thinking, well, I shouldn't have to adjust my management style or my team because referees aren't appropriately punishing players for kicking my best player.
I part ask because game week 10, you've got Sheffield United at home. Mm-hmm. And as we saw yesterday, very good defensively, the Blades. Haaland goes to Manchester United that day. Anyone who's not got Salah is probably going to have Saka and want to stick the armband on him. That game is sandwiched between the Premier League games either side of trips to Stamford Bridge and St James's Park, and in between the Chelsea and the Sheffield United games, it's also a Champions League away game, I think, as well in Seville, I want to say. Do you see him getting a break maybe for that Sheffield United game? Or is that it? He's just, Saka's got 2 legs, he's 80% fit, he's playing.
Yeah, I think if he's 80% fit, he will definitely play.
Even at home to Sheffield United?
Yeah. I think we've seen throughout Arteta's time, unless he is I think he's made 86 or 87 consecutive Premier League appearances now, which broke Arsenal's record of, I think it might not have been Tony Adams, I can't remember. It was somewhat, it had been a while that record had been standing. So yeah, I think he's the kind of player that if he's 80% fit, Arteta will play him. Whether or not he should is a different question. But and I do think it's an issue that could come back to haunt Arsenal down the line, because we've seen, especially Arsenal players, like playing a lot of minutes through injuries, young. I mean, my mind goes straight to Jack Wilshere, especially when they have that kind of similar play style where they almost invite the opposition to challenge them, and they bring the kind of treatment that they get on themselves, because they don't, but players naturally go in for the challenge on players who kind of look to move the ball away at the last second. So I do worry, especially the fact that he's a certain England starter as well. And the amount of international tournaments there are, and Arsenal obviously hope to progress in the Champions League as well. So it looks unlikely he'll get a rest, a decent rest anytime soon.
That's interesting. That Neil, you mentioned Dom Solanke.
Yep.
In your FPL thinking, or not?
Yeah, definitely.
Sell it to me.
So I think the natural gravitation that people will have will be towards our attacking midfielders. I don't think anyone's trusting our defence yet. But if we look at what we've played so far, Iraola is really rotating those 4 positions, the 2 wingers. We have a little bit of an embarrassment of riches there, with sort of Tavernier. You've got Clivert, you've got Brooks, you've got Sinistera. All of these options.
Utara.
Atara as well. I knew I'd forget one of them. So there you go. So you got all of those options that need rotating round because they're all arguably first team caliber players. So it's really hard for me to say get Brooks or get Tavernier. But Solanke has played every minute of the Premier League for us so far. And actually, he looks like a player that we hoped he would be and perhaps was in the Championship for us. He's got 3 goals already. Okay, one of them yesterday was a little bit of a gift, but he still had to put it in the net from 25 yards out, 20 yards out, under pressure. So it's not easy. But if you look at things like the West Ham goal, he had to make that himself. He had to sort of, really go round the players and put it in. And okay, he sort of stumbled it in, but he still finished. This isn't like the Solanke perhaps of last year, where he was a little bit more passive. He was doing a lot for the team, but maybe letting Billing score and go ahead of him. I get the feeling that Solanke really has been the focal point. As I mentioned back as well, the game plan, and you can really see it, is that the wingers and the fullbacks, or wingbacks, I suppose they really are going in and cutting in from the edge of the box and trying to pull a pass back to someone around the penalty spot, which is where Solanke's been sort of hovering. He's also in that lovely little price range now. And I can't see his exact price. I've not got it in front of me.
6.4.
6.4. So yeah, he can help you enable, like you said, those. So if you come down from, let's say, an Alvarez who's 6.9 now, 7. He might give you 500,000, which then you can put towards getting that Salah or whoever it may be. So I think he could be quite a good enabler, particularly when we start to have a little bit more of a run where you might expect us to be a bit more dominant.
Yeah, I think to clarify the fixtures coming up, which is part why you've been scheduled on now, Neil, it's not because of Arsenal. It's because of Arsenal. After Arsenal, it's Everton away, Wolves at home, Burnley at home. Then sure, there's a trip to City, Newcastle at home, Sheffield United away, Aston Villa at home, Crystal Palace away. Like that as a group between game weeks 8 and 15, and then you go to Old Trafford and you can make your own minds up about that. But even beyond that, then it's Luton at home, Nottingham Forest away, Fulham at home.
Yeah.
Before you go to title challengers, Tottenham in game week 20. Adam's pissed himself for the benefit of the audio listeners. I think the problem for Solanke will be, I think that dropping of the 0.5 from, say, an Alvarez to Solanke, when admittedly City come into a more difficult run, probably isn't enough for what most fantasy managers want to do, i.e. thumping probably, say, Liverpool assets, for example. And that's why I think people are probably a little bit more interested in those attacking mids, because it's more likely someone looks to go from a la Matoma to someone at your price bracket of your Kluiverts, etc., to then get a Rashford or even a Saka, dare I say it, to a Mo Salah, something more like that. That's where I think Solanke will probably just keep getting overlooked, I imagine, Neil.
Yeah, I can see it, but I've just got a feeling that he's looking good in fixtures where you would expect us to not maybe scored so many, and to have 3 already is really good for him. I could very much looking at the fixtures that you've just mentioned.
He could stay the whole way through that if he goes in. Yeah, I agree with that.
There's absolutely no challenge to him at the moment either. I don't see, unless he gets injured, and I'm touching wood here. Keith Lamore is not at the level that he can, nudge him off. I don't see anyone else really being able to do that. I think Kluivert would be the next one in the list, and he's not gonna push Solanke off. So that he could sit there from sort of week 8 onwards, all the way to Christmas, and he'll score 5 or 6. I think.
Who would you be selling?
So for me at the moment, I'm leaning towards. So I've got Alvarez, so that would probably be who I would be leaning towards selling. Just because I think with now the Champions League is really starting to bite. I think City are just going to rotate, and I just want to get off Pep Roulette and having 3 of them, because it gives me little palpitations every time at 1 minute to 3 or 2.
Timing wise, obviously, look, if you are going to go in 8 when Bournemouth go to Everton, the start of this good run starts. Obviously, City go to Arsenal in the same game week, it does work. I think the problem with the bite for Manchester City is there isn't any in their Champions League group, Neil. And their Premier League fixtures are such that I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of rotation for their key players. And at the moment, Alvarez is one. But if you were going to make that sort of move, yes, it would be 8. If you were to dive in on any of them attacking mids, Neil, where would you go? If someone said, right, you've got to get a Bournemouth midfielder as part of funding Mo Salah, which one would you go for?
Probably Tavernier at the moment. He would be
the most expensive. Good lad. Well done.
Yeah, I think he's the most likely to play every week out of all of them. That said, as we touched on earlier, when Scott comes back, Billing becomes really interesting to me as an option. Because I think he will go into that role just behind Solanke, where, as we know, Billing can score. So yeah, I think that would be really interesting then.
I think it was the people were hoping, Neil, that you were going to say one of the 4.8s, which would be Kleiber or Utara.
No, they're both being rotated.
I think that left wing position now is a little bit ugly for you in the sense, because I'd spoke to you about this previously about Tavernier probably being the one that's most suitable to play from the right if that left-sided bias becomes more profound, and I think it will do when these fixtures really improve for you. Tavernier though is 5.4, which is suddenly you're only a million less than Mitomas and stuff, aren't you? That's the difficulty problem in there.
Yeah, I to be honest, I think the value when we hit the better fixtures will be in our fullbacks. I mean, I bang the Kirkes drum a lot, and I think he will get more joy, and we're starting to see him grow into it. As I said, he's having assists for Hungary. It's only a matter of time before he starts for us. So I think maybe, and he's in the 4.5 bracket, maybe even a touch less after his own goal.
I'll tell you one thing that's really going to count against him. We've obviously seen a lot of investment for Newcastle defenders, and it will keep coming. If you look at Newcastle's run of fixtures, the one fixture that stands out as, I'm not sure I want to play him, is Arsenal at home in game week 11. And you go to Manchester City that week.
Yep.
That's not going to help. Just when you're looking at rotation, apparently, oh, God, right. So if I've got Botman and Kirkes there, right, I don't necessarily want, in that, you'd still pick Botman, wouldn't you? Under that circumstance.
Oh, definitely.
Worth a look though. If people can find the right rotation that works for them, then yes, it would be Kirkes. I agree, of the defensive assets, and I think Neto will tick over fine in goal, wouldn't
he? Yeah, and he's had a few little mistakes, but again, I think in part that is maybe due to his defense in front of him. But that's only going to get more shored up and more used to each other. And I do think, again, to ram home that point, when Adams comes in and they've got a little bit more protection in front, I think we'll see a few more clean sheets.
Yeah. Adam, what Arsenal you got at the moment?
Just Saka for me at the moment. I wildcarded last week, so going into the game week that's just gone.
I presume there's no consideration taking him out, is there?
Not at the moment, no.
Even because obviously there's a tough little run coming up for yourselves after Bournemouth. Maybe we should put Bournemouth a part of that. City at home, Chelsea away, then there's that Sheffield United fixture, then there's Newcastle away, then there's a nice stretch again, then your Christmas is quite challenging. You're happy to hold him through, I take it.
Yeah, I think I might have dithered a little bit if Rodri hadn't been sent off for Man City. So obviously he's now suspended for the Arsenal game, which I think might give us a little bit more freedom from an attacking perspective there.
I think it might give you a lot more, mate.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure Chelsea is a bad fixture at all. So I wouldn't really look at that as being much of an issue.
Started and ended this podcast with a Chelsea dig, but I have to ask you, I take it Jesus not on radar for you?
Not at the moment, no. Not whilst you've got Alvarez, who looks, like you were saying, to be an important part of City's attack at sort of 2 million, well, maybe 1.5 cheaper. And then you've got Watkins, maybe now he'll kick on after getting a goal. He was one I looked at, but I think there are just better options, cheaper.
Saka over Odegaard, if you were going no, is that straightforward for you?
Yeah, looks to have reclaimed penalties. And I think Odegaard is a good option, but I don't think we are looking fluent enough from an attacking perspective to justify.
Quiet yesterday. he's an unbelievable player, but I thought he was quite quiet.
Yeah, he had, I think he averages sort of like 50, 60 touches or so a game, and I think he definitely had less than that, and his pass accuracy was like 64%, I think. And I think a lot of that was due to Rice going off in the second half, meaning he didn't have a kind of midfield shield. With all due respect to Jorginho, who obviously I think is the best midfielder in the world.
Yes, I got that. One final one, Gabriel.
Yes,
he's dropped to 4.7.
He definitely dropped to 4.8. I don't know if he's down at 4.7.
I think if he hasn't gone to 4.7 overnight, he might have been very close to. Yes, he did. Dropped last night to 4.7. We should be looking at now, shouldn't we? I mean, we're talking about Alvarez to Solanke for finding 500,000. We'll all go Saliba to Gabriel now and find 500,000.
I think if you're on wildcard, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But then again, are you looking, how many of those fixtures that you listed earlier are you looking at and thinking there's an Arsenal clean sheet? If we're assuming Declan Rice could be out this weekend, even if Declan Rice was in, I don't know if I'd back us to keep a clean sheet.
But it's cheap enough, isn't it, Adam? It's cheap enough that you could rotate it anyway.
You
could play it at Chelsea. You keep telling me it's an easy fixture. I might tell everyone else it's an easy fixture. Sheffield United only play. Obviously, City in 8, Newcastle 8. Every other fixture, I'd be like, yeah, fine, whatever.
Yeah, but you've got teams like Villa who are coming into a good run, and you've got people like Cash who are at 4.7, who's a more attacking player. You talking about the Newcastle defenders, probably go Botman, you would say, over there. I don't know what you would think about Udogie, but I think a lot of people have already got investment there at 4.7. So I think it would be, if you're on wildcard, I would understand people moving down from Saliba to free up the funds. I don't necessarily know if it's somewhere where I would look to buy in at. Yeah.
Go Gabriel over Saliba if you're wildcarding now, though, wouldn't
you? Because of the cost, yeah.
Okay. Do you think he'll stay in now? Are we over all this shite that was happening in the first month?
I bloody hope so. I can't be dealing with any more of that.
Can you fathom it, reflecting on it now?
I can only think it is because Zinchenko was injured. That's the only justification, the only vague justification, because even then, I don't know if inverting from the right really made a whole lot of sense, because it completely shifted the dynamic of our midfield and our attack.
But even still, things like, and Kivior's been fine, what I've seen of him, but it was a game he still picked Kivior over Gabriel, and Gabriel was perfectly capable of playing the role.
Yeah. I mean,
am I reading that wrong?
No, I don't necessarily think you are. I think, maybe it was a combination of the Zinchenko injury and the Saudi transfer rumours. They weren't like sort of super solid concrete, but I mean, they were there. So I can only think it's that, and God, I hope that's behind us.
Yeah, that would be the only, to be honest, I would think if I was wildcarding now, I'd be tempted to put him in and just, you mentioned people like Cash, fine, rotate him with like Cash, Udogie, Botman, and the Stupinan, like something like that, and just pick your best 3 every week would be fine, or Kirkes, obviously, for Neil, obviously. But I guess the doubt in your mind would be, well, if something happens to Zinchenko, am I going to start stressing about this again? Like,
and Zinchenko isn't exactly he's not exactly injury free. He's picked up quite a few injuries in the past couple of years, so I wouldn't be too confident of him staying fit. But I mean, on wildcard, if you've already got Saliba, I can completely understand people making that switch to free up the funds. I think it makes sense.
Okay, cool. Gents, thank you both so much. Neil, let's do a correct score prediction for Saturday, please, mate.
2-1 to us.
Just let that fester for a moment. Adam?
Because obviously I knew you were going to ask this. I was flipping in my head as we were talking between 2-2 and 3-1 to Arsenal. If Rice is fit, I think we'll win 3-1. If Rice isn't fit, I think it'll be 2-2.
I don't think the listeners and the viewers were expecting it to end like this. I am actually, I'm in agreement though, in that if Rice isn't unavailable, or if Rice is unavailable, I think you get something, Neil. I've been quite quietly impressed with what I've seen from you so far. And even in the game where we played really well against you, I'll tell you what, that start the second half you had is as many difficulties we've had against arguably anybody, bar probably the opening half hour yesterday. So, yeah, I like what you're doing now. And I think we're going to see some good stuff from Bournemouth over the next couple of months. And you haven't been, as you said, you haven't been like wiped away by anybody, right? So
No.
I think if Rice plays, Arsenal win. If he doesn't, I'll go 1-1.
I'm going to caveat mine by saying the same with Rice. That's what I was going on from what you said before.
And that's why the second most expensive British transfer of all time is so important, right, Adam?
Yeah, and as Sidge will say, I'm sure when you speak to him later, it's still a bargain.
Yeah, Chelsea fans think the same about Moises Caicedo at the moment as well. And on that bombshell, because we can't just dig Chelsea out all day, but you spent loads and it's going to happen, kids. Sorry. Neil, anything you want to plug before you go, mate?
No, just the Twitters or X.
The X, AFCBNG. And for you, Adam?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at 35who. I mean, you can if you like.
Good man. Thank you, mate. Yes, if you want cheese puns and all the rest of that jazz. And Adam's completely non-biased, but with old age, as he begins to age, I can promise you his tweets are getting more and more biased every single day. Good luck to you, mate. Well done. You're one of the few Arsenal fans in the world that I actually like. Tomorrow, Suj is back with me for the Game Week Review podcast. We do have another clash of correspondents coming up on Thursday ahead of the double, Luton versus Burnley with Dan Ashby and Jack Turner, which leaves me to say thanks again so much to Neil and to Adam. Good luck this weekend, gents. Cue music, please. Man child.